Cool, man. Do you want to share and start?
Um, all right. So weekly show and tell. What am I going to show or tell? All right. Let me tell my story about moving from prompt based content like generation, which I think is what most people are kind of familiar with LLMs or AI. It's like write me a blog post about this topic,
Yeah.
and you and I have talked about this particular topic for a long time as far as like what is the AI role? And I think for me, at the beginning of this whole process, it was can we use LLMs to automate content generation for stuff that is pretty instructional and like kind of a logical progression. Here's how you would fix this recipe. Here's how you would count your macros. Here's how, here's what a split mini split air conditioner is. Write a blog post about that for
Yeah.
for kind of the SEO game. And then as we've gone through that process, I've started to feel like that that sort of thing was such a low barrier of entry that was all that was going to be produced. And so that's kind of led us down this path of what really is helpful content. How does AI play into that? And for me, moving away from it being an SEO tool and more just an ideation tool has been pretty powerful. So, as a writer, using AI to generate content over the long term, and we're talking like the last 2 years or however long we've been talking about this, I felt like more and more of my voice was being stripped away from this, and I was becoming an operator in terms of just telling an anonymous teammate what to do, like an intern, and then having to correct it and getting to a point where the end product was like, okay, this is good enough, and then we would ship it. And doing that for the period of a year just got me feeling like I'm adding to the noise. I'm adding to the flood of content that seems to be helpful, but I don't know for real. Like I don't even know if anybody cares about this stuff. And to be
Yeah.
honest, I couldn't care about it, so I couldn't imagine anybody else caring about it. And that may be a little bit of a harsh like reflection, but using it now in this conversational way was great. And I'll just walk through how that's changed for me. And I don't know if I should even if screen sharing is probably not going to be the best way to do this, but
No.
just as an example, I'll use my shower thought, nostalgia shower thought as an example. So when it comes to writing content for stuff that's not SEO purposes, and I'm going to talk about this in more like a creative writing framework. I've wanted to write more creatively for a while and have struggled to sort of get over that hump because you don't see a lot of mailmen taking walks on their day off. Plumbers aren't fixing toilets in their spare time. Like I was creating and writing content for other people and other people's voices or for the algorithm. And when it came to writing stuff for myself, I just didn't have the energy. By the time it got around to it, it was like the last thing that I wanted to focus on. And so using the conversational technique, the first time I really tried that was I had a thought in the shower of why is America so obsessed with nostalgia? And I have teenagers, they're dressing like I was dressing in the late 90s, early 2000s. And that was part of what spurred this. But my initial angle for this piece of writing that I was going to try to do was a snarky bit on we've recycled everything fun in America. Strawberry shortcake, Transformers, GI Joe, whatever. We've recycled all of this fun stuff, and now we're having to dig into like the darker nostalgia of time when women didn't have bodily autonomy and the great replacement theory was regarded as like scientific
Yeah.
and um, so it was going to be a little bit of a snark piece about that. But going in and having this conversation with Claude, and I actually had a few different models up just to gauge the quality of the outputs from Claude versus
Yeah.
DeepSeek versus ChatGPT, and kind of just started out as a historical research standpoint of like, where does nostalgia come from? When did that become a thing? And trying to get some more context for this comedic article, I ended up learning a lot about American history and the triggers of why nostalgia became a thing, and what were sort of the historical markers over the last 50 to 100 years that triggered big waves of nostalgia. And that kind of spidered off into this other angle of seeing something that one of the models spit back out, and pulling on that thread. And the thing that is really cool about this use case is I thought I had an output in mind, but I did not go into it asking it to complete a task for me. I used it more as I would in a conversation with you about a topic that you knew more about than I did. And that led to some very, very interesting creative endpoints for me, which wound up not being a published piece at all, or at least it may not be, but I have this document now that was sort of the sum total of what came from that conversation. And it's very insightful and it rang very true to me. And maybe it turns into something down the road, but as of right now, it's not. It was the end of a good conversation. And
Yeah.
now I have a document to take away from that. Which is sort of the reason why we started recording these calls, was because we got some gems sometimes that
Yeah.
like
Yep.
come from these things, and to be able to go back and reference that is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that was the show / tell that I wanted to talk about, and I can go into deeper detail in terms of what I've been using that for recently. But why don't you take the mic for a little bit and
Yeah.
what's been going on for you,
I'll,
going on with you for the last week?
before I do that, I want to piggyback off of what you said, because we've been on this journey together. It started off with this Substack that we found. What's it called? Blockbuster content.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, the
So
blockbuster method or something.
yeah,
Blockbuster
yeah, yeah.
blueprint. Blockbuster blueprint.
Yes. Thank you. And this guy is not only prolific in his output, but just completely reframed how we think about AI, right, going
Yeah.
forward. And one of the things that really opened us to possibility is the way that he prompts when creating new content. That you're right. It isn't just a write me a blog post about X. And even if you're taking that to like, more details and adding more context or whatever, his framework was he has this frontier prompting framework.
Yeah,
And it's
it's
based off
super
the
open ended. It's
yep,
like
super open ended, and it's based off of learning about a topic and using that learning to generate something new. And so I love the process that you're going through, and I've been going through that process as well, because it is, when I try to create a piece of content, it isn't just I'm just trying to get some piece of content out there. There's a learning experience. Like I'm literally creating some new learning out of that. And for me,
yeah,
who loves learning, it's really addictive. We talked about that too. Like,
yeah,
man, it's like sometimes I have to stop. Like I have to force myself to stop. So I love that. And I think the other idea, and you talked about this, I think the other idea that's been really on my mind is the idea that like the chat that you have, the conversation that you have,
yeah.
becomes a source document. So one of
Mhm.
his frameworks, his frontier prompting framework is, it's a handful of prompts at its basic level, right? Let's say I want to learn about marketing, right? As a topic. And so he'll start off with a prompt, not like give me information about marketing. He'll start off with a prompt like list 10 diverse mental models around
Yeah,
marketing from diverse academic perspectives. And so now that it won't just come with just like a basic historical model of marketing, it comes at it from different perspectives. And then he'll say, okay, for each perspective, let's dive into each one. And then
mhm,
he'll individually say, tell me more about jobs to be done. Right. And
yeah,
they'll go into this big thing. And then tell me more about Seth Godin's permission marketing. Right. And they'll go
yeah,
into that. And they'll go into those 10 ones. And then he'll take another prompt. And so now you're sort of going through that. You're learning about each individual model. And then he'll take another prompt and say, give me the similarities and differences between these 10 models, right? And then give me the strengths and weaknesses of these 10 models. And then the final prompt in his sort of basic version is create a meta model that takes advantages of the strengths and takes advantages of the similarities and build this sort of meta model around all 10 of these crazy diverse mental models, right? And now you end up with this framework that takes into account all 10 of these models. And now you've created something new. And what I love is that you've created some new learning around it. And now you have this chat. And now this chat, where it has all this information and all this data behind it, now becomes your source material for the next thing you want to create, which is here's my new framework around marketing, right?
Yeah.
This never before seen framework around marketing. I just built it. And so it's a really cool process. It's been really cool for me. And it's applied to my show and tell from an SEO perspective as well, or at least the way I'm thinking about it. But yeah, I love what you've been building. Excited for you to share in the future the stuff that you build, because I think you're really locked in. I think you've cracked the code, man.
I appreciate that. And I think, letting people know on your side of things, because I think this relationship has been really beneficial, because we both sort of approach this from opposite ends of the spectrum, where I was coming at it from a very like creative lens, and you were looking at it as a very like practical, SEO algorithmic,
Yep,
kind of structured lens.
yep,
And I believe we've kind of eclipsed one another, where I'm now doing a lot more of that structural exploration and you're doing a lot more of the creative exploration. But
yep.
that is the cool thing about this whole evolution of stuff, is on a basic level of work from whatever it is we're doing. Like from a creative standpoint, you can look at the process you just described of examining different mental models, or whatever, examining a bulk of information, finding similarities, finding differences, asking it to look at it from different perspectives to pull novelty out of it.
Yeah.
And some people might look at that workflow and be like, well, that's just AI, stealing or plagiarizing. And that's all you're doing, is you're just using AI to plagiarize other people's ideas.
Sure.
And there's a lot of validity behind that concern. And I don't want to feel like I'm punishing somebody by using this tool for myself. But the way I look at that approach specifically is it's no different than any creative process. Like every creative output is some sort of amalgamation of experiences, of knowledge, of references. Star Wars, as an example, is a samurai movie. It's a Western. It's a radio serial. Like all of these genres that influenced George Lucas, he wound up mashing together and spitting out Star Wars. And now that's a new source document. Like you were saying, every output you have now winds up going back into the source.
Yeah.
So if you're only using existing knowledge of AI to churn out new source, of course that's going to dilute things, and the gene pool of new ideas is going to get pretty shallow.
Yeah.
But using it in this way, where your goal is novelty, not expediency or automation.
Yeah.
That's where this thing becomes very, very interesting and cool, and has got me completely reignited in excitement for like working this into my daily workflows and daily life.
Yeah.
And it definitely is not saving me time right now, because these conversations go on hours.
That's
like
right.
2-hour chats, just exploring ideas. So this isn't a shortcut by any means, but the quality of my work has gotten better, because now if I have a random thought, I can pursue it. And the tool is there with infinite knowledge and infinite references. And so even if I say, oh, I heard something one time that said this, do you know where that's from? Oh yeah, that can be attributed to this. Okay, what are some more ideas like that? Because I really like the way that was framed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And having it come back to stuff and and come back with stuff that I didn't know about. So I'm learning and I'm pulling new source in and then using that to push new source out. That's what's really cool for me at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. The newness of it. I heard a great quote the other day of something talking about like sort of the future of work, and we talked about, in the past, before AI, somewhat before the internet, but definitely before AI, that the differentiating factor from you getting a job versus someone else getting a job was how much knowledge did you have, right?
Yeah.
And even in the after the internet becomes mature, and so we have Google with infinite knowledge. It still took knowledge to find that knowledge, right? Like it wasn't
Yeah.
like that knowledge was just given to you. But that's no longer the case. I can find new knowledge. I can do that 10 diverse mental models prompt in a
Mhm.
second and get
Yeah.
a whole bunch of new knowledge like that, right? And so what's going to be the new differentiating factor is not whether you have knowledge, is whether you can create new knowledge, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that's what you're doing in that process, is creating something new. It doesn't mean you don't have to fact check. It doesn't mean you don't have to base it in experience and things like that. But creating new knowledge, I think, is going to be what's more important.
Yeah. Um, to that end, uh, my wife listened to this podcast on the daily. Ezra Klein interviewed a guy named Tom Friedman, and it's funny because she's like, I think I saw this guy speak at the U when I was in college, like 20 years ago.
He's an OG.
And
Yeah, he was on
yeah,
the. Yeah, he's an OG for sure.
and she went back and looked, and she's like, it was like
Yeah,
I went and heard him speak when globalism was like a
the
new
the world
topic.
is flat. Yeah, he was the
Yeah,
guy. Yeah, yeah.
and he this interview she sent it to me, and it's amazing. I really back this dude. He swears all the time, and like it's a great interview.
Yeah.
Um,
Is it recent?
yeah, it was
Oh,
like last week, and
oh, cool. I have to check it out.
the topic of the interview is um, the U.S. is getting China dangerously wrong,
Mm,
and so he's an expert in like U.S. China relations and everything like the global business world, basically.
yeah.
And he's talking about how the current approach towards China is so backwards because he's like we can't try to beat them. That's the wrong relationship to have right now because they're so far ahead of the US on certain aspects, and AI is one of the things that he brings up as far as like this is not a new technology. This is a new world,
Yeah.
and we need to start looking at AI as a new species. And we are not learning how to interact with this new species at the same rate or at the same quality that China is.
Mm,
And when, if you start thinking of it as a species, like this could easily become a dominant species in the world. And like the wolf and the humans, like we were benefiting from one another. And eventually the humans become the dominant species because of their cognitive abilities. And when you have something that has infinitely more cognitive power than a human does, it's not that much of a leap to think that like we could be obsolete pretty quick
yeah.
if we don't get a handle on this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so it like that may sound doomsday ish or not, but the interview is worth listening to for a lot of reasons. But his thing on AI is great. He references that Sapiens.
Yep.
There's a trilogy of books. It's like Sapiens and um, whatever. He's like,
Yeah.
go back, read all of that stuff. That is all crazy applicable right now
Mm.
when thinking about AI. So
I
that's on my reading list.
love Tom Friedman back in the day. I have to check that out. I didn't know
Yeah,
he's still doing stuff. That's cool.
yeah. I'll send the link to this thing.
So my show and tell is also around content from an SEO perspective. But I'll take a step back and say I'm with you where I don't know how much people care about most SEO content that's written on the internet that I've helped build, right? Just from my own personal search habits, right? I skip past a lot of stuff, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I think for me, the ultimate goal is how do we create content in, in a 2025 world that like is actually really helpful, right? However we want to define what helpful is, how do we create that? But first step for me is how do I use AI to sort of create what we got now, right? That's sort
Yeah.
of what's in my brain, and then from there, how do we take that to the step further? And I also think about you know the writers who I've worked with, including people like yourself, whose jobs are dependent on creating SEO content, and am I taken away from their work, and there may be some truth to that. But I also think the writers that's going to embrace AI are going to really drive this revolution, right? They're going to be the primary content creators, and they're going to know what good content is and what good content isn't, and they're going to now have an opportunity that all the stuff that they wish they would have been able to do but they couldn't do because they had to just get out 1,500 words so they can get out the next 1,500 words so they get out the next 1,500 words, and now going to be able to do those cool things, right, that they thought about in college, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm excited for that world. But I'll show what I've been working on. So one of the things from a B2B perspective that I've always found valuable, or at least I see a pattern, is like the B2B companies, whether that's SaaS or a consulting company or some sort of service company or some sort of B2B product, having a glossary on their site is
Mm-hmm.
just a crazy win, right? In B2B, there's a bunch of different niches, and those niches, typically every competitor is fighting over the same 1,000 clicks, right? Because the B2B can be so niche. But then there's those like 1 to 2 unicorns that figure out how to just 100x what everyone else is doing, right? The example I always use is like Bamboo HR. They're an HR software, a pretty niche thing. There's only a handful of people in the entire world that really care about HR software. And so, most sites in that space are going to get 100, 1,000, maybe 5,000 clicks a month, and yet they get more, right? Part of that is their brand, but the biggest section of their site is their glossary section. And I think that section creates like a rising tide lifts all boats perspective where traffic to that section of the site goes up, backlinks to that section of the site goes up, and it just sort of lifts everything else to go along
Mm-hmm.
with it. So I've been trying to figure out how I can create glossary content at some sort of scale using AI. Like you, I've been in sort of the prompting world of doing prompts and going back and forth between prompts and copy pasting prompts, and that worked out pretty well, right? I've gotten a pretty good process, and then I stumbled upon fine tuning OpenAI models, right? And I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Me and you did. You told me about this maybe 7, 8 months ago, and you were like, "Dude, this is amazing! You can do this fine tuning thing. You can fine tune the model." And I didn't get it. I was like, "Oh, that sounds cool." And then, yeah, 3 weeks ago, I'm like, "Oh, that's what he's talking about." So that
Well,
experience has happened
there's so
multiple
much
times.
information that you just get
Yeah,
overloaded. And like, man,
that's
I
right.
can't. All right, cool. I'll get to that maybe, but like,
Yeah,
I don't see
yeah,
a use case right in front of me. I'm not going to learn about it yet.
yep,
You'll just
exactly,
you'll get
exactly.
you'll get boondoggled and overwhelmed like instantly.
Yeah, yeah, no, totally, totally. So it was an idea that its time had came,
The
right?
ideas time had come.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, exactly. So I'm gonna share my screen and show just
Yep.
what I got. All right, so I've been working on this spreadsheet. It looks familiar. This is like my old content brief generator spreadsheet that I built a year or two ago. And so the way that I got this built out is I have like a target keyword, a page name. Here's an outline for an article. So imagine I'm doing an article for a glossary post, like what is B2B marketing. And then I've broken out each individual section, and the way that I have this built out is I have prompts for each individual section.
Mhm.
And then I'll just go through and basically generate that prompt. I'll basically send that prompt over to my custom fine tuned model. I could send this over to like just the general GPT-4o model, and that would work out well. But this is my customized model. The way that
Mhm.
I built that training data for that model, I use starting off with dummies.com. So dummies.com, like marketing for dummies, right? They have a
Mhm.
lot of their content that comes from their book. They have a lot of their content on their website. So I took that data, I took that content off, scrape that content. And the reason I chose dummies is I know that their content, I like the way their content's written. It's sort of written in a sort of beginner style that I think works well for glossary. And then two, I know their content was handwritten, right?
Mhm.
Which is important. I started off when I tried to do this, just taking any website content. But the
Yeah.
problem is some of that content, a lot of that content wasn't written by a human, right? And so I'm just training it to do the exact same thing that I would do
Yeah.
with normal GPT. So I had to train it on human content. So I started off there, and then now what I'm doing is as I'm creating new outputs, the first ones were kind of like I had to do some serious editing to them, right? But now, once I get done with that editing, I then re-upload that training data, right? So I take
Mhm.
those outputs, and so hopefully they'll sort of just continue to build upon itself and build upon itself until I get it right. So like a few of the outputs I've done, I've put those into the training data, and then actually now what I'm doing is I'm just generating a bunch of them and just cleaning those up and then sending those up. So I'm just going to continue to update the training data. So now I've got all my information. I've got this prompt that basically says, draft me a section of this article. What is B2B marketing? And then I
Mhm.
just hit the button, and then it drafts that section for me.
And you've outlined all that earlier in the sheet where you're
Yep.
like, these are the different sections, and yeah.
Yep, exactly. So I got all the different sections, and then the prompt that gets sent over. So here's an example. It says, "Here's a page that I'm building," and I give it a page name. Here's the
Mhm.
outline. I give it the outline. Write this section. What is B2B marketing, right? And then I give it, whatever rules that I want to give it. What I love about this process is it takes away the need for the crazy prompts, and I don't have to
Mhm.
go back and say, no, this isn't quite right or whatever. I mean, I still sort of have to do that a little bit because, again, I'm still sort of training it. But every time I train it, it gets less and less. And so now it just sees what I normally would do, and I just say, write me a section, and it just writes the section, right? I do put into sort of a system prompt. I like I've come up with this document that I create for brands. It's like a point of view
Mhm.
document, but basically says, here's how I think about whatever industry I'm in, right?
Yeah.
And it's based off of like how they built their service or their product. So I do add that in as a system prompt, and that gives it some flavor, right? It doesn't
Mhm.
just give me whatever is in its training data, right? It says, okay, from this perspective, here
Yeah.
is what B2B marketing is. So that's been super helpful as well. But I've been really digging this process, and like I said, it takes away the need of having to do a bunch of different copy paste prompts and things like that. The other thing I like about this process, the other reason that I'm doing it this way is I want to create content that passes AI detection. I don't necessarily worry that things don't pass AI detection. If you do a random search for any keyword and then put the top pages into an AI detector, they're all going to come back 80% plus detected.
Mhm.
It's just the way the world is. So I'm not afraid of that. But you do use AI detection as a marker of like, does it sound like a human or does it sound like a robot? Right. That's sort
Right.
of the way I think about it. So that was the other reason I wanted to do this way. I wanted to train a model on how to write like a human without having to say things like add more perplexity or burstiness, which never works.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah,
yeah, that's really funny too because you can say, I mean, you do say that you want to write, you want to create this stuff so it sounds like it was written by a human and not a robot.
yeah,
But I think maybe there's some tangential benefit of like if you're creating stuff that isn't getting pulled as or getting flagged as AI gen, then maybe that is maybe contributing to the anti-homogenization of content because
yeah,
if it's showing up as novel on an AI detector, maybe that is actually new,
yep,
and the stuff that you're putting back into the source is not going to dumb it down or drain the gene pool, so we're all just reading
yeah.
articles with
The
elevate
exact same
and
voice, the
unlock
exact same tone.
and
Yeah,
yeah.
totally. Totally. Yeah, and in today's digital world and
Yeah.
and M dashes, right?
Yeah.
Um and so yeah, and so this has worked out really well, man. I really like this. I've come up with a pretty good outline process. So it wouldn't look this simple, but I got a pretty good outline process, and so it's come out pretty well. There's still a bunch of editing that I'm doing, but every time I do something, I have to do an edit. I'm just going to put it back into the training model, right, and just like keep feeding it, keep feeding it good examples. I think the next step for me. Oh, so the other reason I wanted to do this was I wanted to create a scenario similar to what I did with a copy brief generator. With a copy
Mhm.
brief generator with this, I can create 50 copy briefs in 20 minutes, right?
Yep.
That's sort of the same way that I hope to be able to approach this. Is eventually this won't be just one page. This will be 30 pages, right? And I go
Mhm.
through this process and create all 30 pages at once. But I think probably I'm probably going to move away from using Google Sheets as my tool. And we talked about this, probably use something like NAN or some sort of agent builder to
Mhm.
actually really do this
And
automatically.
that's something that has been a roadblock for me this entire time. Like the
Yeah.
agentic stuff, I have spent so much time on so many different tools trying to get a multi-step complex problem solved with an agent.
Yeah.
And with the spreadsheet that you've made, one of the strengths is it does it in such bite-sized pieces
Yep.
that it never has the chance to go completely rogue.
Yeah.
And you're able to see as you move down the sheet progressively, is this shaping up to be a good output?
Yeah.
And the fine tuning stuff that you're doing, I think, is going to benefit that process tremendously. And I'm curious to see as you get into more of the agentic building stuff, what your success is. Um, because I heard the the design lead at Domo gave a talk a couple weeks ago, and they're really leaning heavy into like AI for data analytics and um, systems building. He showed off a program that they had built for one of their clients that's in fleet. They have like vehicle fleets,
Mm.
and this tool they built for them is like it's a combination of a dispatch, like think of it like as a taxi dispatch. And he didn't use this metaphor. I'm just making sense of it in my head this way, where you have like a central location, a garage, where they're dispatching cabs to various places.
Yeah.
They know where all the vehicles are, and this company's in the delivery business. So if they had a delivery that needed to be done, they could pull this dashboard up on their computer and show the locations of every vehicle in their fleet and say, oh, if we need to get this thing from point A to point B, we need to reroute this driver to go pick that up. It's more efficient for him to do that on his route. So he's going to be the delivery person for that. So there's like an efficiency thing here.
Yeah.
But then they also had the vehicle's diagnostics somehow tied into this dashboard to where they could go to a view and see which vans needed to be have an oil change soon or the brakes replaced. And he was like, this the use of this AI, when we're talking about building tools like this, the prototypes are easy. The production of it is where it breaks
Yeah.
down
Yeah.
99% of the time. And
Yep.
like these tools that you're using and building for yourself are great. But then trying to scale that up to a person that doesn't have the experience that you have building the thing, and you've kind of worked out that system in your head of the way you want it to go,
Yep.
trying to train somebody on that and get them to use it in a way that gets the same results is tricky.
Yeah.
And so like i'm I'm beyond, or not maybe beyond, I'm at the point now where I'm not looking for something that I can build and sell to somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's more like at this point, can I prototype stuff for me that works, and then maybe somebody else might have a use case for it, and then we can talk about
Yeah.
how to build that system for them.
I'm at the same place as well. And I that was the reason I like using Google Sheets, because there was like, especially in the early days where I like you couldn't get consistent results. We still were just learning it, right?
Yeah.
Like being able to iterate and seeing like that human in the loop experience. So like I do
Mm-hmm.
something, I see a result. Oops, I didn't like that. I'm either gonna adjust my prompt or just rerun that again.
Yeah.
I like that experience, but I do think and I'm still new at this as well. I do think the opportunity with fine tuning and like continuously updating a model does give you those guardrails a little bit more. That if I'm just constantly feeding it data that says, do this same thing, do this same thing, do this
This is
same
good.
thing.
This is good. This is good. This is good.
Yep, yep. That eventually I'm hoping that it gets to a good result. I was doing some YouTube videos this morning as well. And I think the other thing to add into this is like, there's sort of two components to this. There's like the writer, right, as an
Mhm.
agent. There probably needs to be an evaluator as an agent that says, here is the standard. If it doesn't hit this standard, go back and do
Yeah.
something else, right? Which is what I would do, right?
Mhm.
Myself. And so having that layer built into it, that like sort of continuous feedback loop until the evaluator says good and then
Mhm.
push off, I think is the other part to add into
Yeah,
that.
kind of
So,
building those adversarial systems where you've got the like challenger and the
yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I forget
Exactly.
those
Exactly.
labels, but it's like who can win? Who like the battle of the bots of like can this one fool this one, and then
Yep.
this one learns, and then it
Yep.
tries to fool this one, and then they kind of go back and forth and get better and better just
Until it
naturally.
hits it. Yep. Yep. Exactly. But I,
Yeah.
I think the opportunity that I'm really excited about, again, this is just to sort of recreate um, what we currently see, right? With some tweaks to it, right? Like I'm adding things like information gain and things like that into it to sort of try to bring some novelty to it. But I think the real thing is going to be, um, a can we do that crazy learning frontier chat process built into this and incorporate that into a glossary? Now we've made this glossary something completely different than what you would see. Or it could be like, hey, I built the skeleton, but I'm going to focus all of my time on uh, UX on that page, right?
Mhm.
Which I think is really important that I don't think about a lot, but I'm starting to lately. And so now I can spend more time on that because I didn't have to spend so much time on the content. Or as a writer, I'm going to interview 5 people around this glossary topic and include those interview notes on this page, right? And talk about like, hey, yeah, here's a B2B marketer that's in the industry. Here's how they think about B2B marketing, right? And be
Yeah.
able to add that. A writer couldn't do that previously, right? They had no time to do that. And so that's really what I'm excited about is, hey, can I just build the base skeleton and then now let's build something really great because
Yeah.
the base skeleton is already taken care of for us. So.
Yeah. I think the more people the more people that start experimenting with this, and it's weird being a writer and talking about this topic. And I felt this way at the very beginning. The whole reason why I wanted to learn more about it was to see how screwed I was.
Yeah,
And
right. Me too.
like,
Likewise.
am I out of a job tomorrow? Am I out of a
Likewise.
job? Like, how worried do I need to be about this?
Totally. Totally. Totally get
And
that.
um, so it's becoming less taboo to talk about it. And I definitely don't begrudge anyone who uses these tools to save time or because there's a lot of 1-2 person shops out there,
Yeah.
and unfortunately every business has to be a social media expert now.
Yep.
So like maybe you just wanted to open a muffler shop, but now you got to know what Yelp is. Like
Yeah.
that is a crazy world to have to live in. So to use AI to say, write my Google Maps description or, like Google
Totally.
uh, meta tags or write some social media copy for my muffler
Yep.
content, like I don't begrudge anybody that. I do find myself becoming more and more annoyed seeing just one input, one output.
Yeah.
And so for anybody that's watching this and wondering like, should I be using AI? I would say yes, you should be using it in some capacity, but don't take it at face value whatsoever.
Yeah.
And like the you're the Matrix when he's just looking at the stuff falling down the screen and he's like, I don't
Yeah.
even see the code, I just see like blonde, brunette, and whatever. I've started to blur my eyes a little bit looking at content, and the shape of AI content
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is recognizable.
100%.
And particularly on LinkedIn, it's not that there's not good outputs coming out of it, but I can open up somebody's post and blur my eyes, and the shape of that content reveals itself as being AI generated.
Yes.
So
Yes.
if you don't want your stuff to look like it was chat GPT, for LinkedIn as the example, no more 3 emoji bullet points.
Yeah. Brain. I'm guilty of
Yeah,
that too.
yeah.
Brain and
Header, kill that.
yeah. Yeah.
That's an immediate dead giveaway.
Yeah. Totally.
Um,
Totally.
and
It's
it again, like I'm joking about it because I have to. I'm looking at it all day, and I'm kind of in that world. But um, do yourself a favor and take that extra step to make it yours, and don't just make it like what
yeah.
ChatGPT said it should be.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what's really important for me too. And um I like we've talked about this. I am not a writer, and so a lot of this right now is just me learning the writing process. And a lot of my early failures that people I would send people content, and they'd be like, "What are you doing? This is terrible. I can't use this." Was just the fact that like I didn't know the writing process, right? And I still don't,
Yeah.
obviously, but
No,
it's
I would
forced me to.
disagree with that.
Yeah, but it's forced me to learn it, right? And so the learning process and just the minimal amount of writing knowledge that I have compared to what I had 2 months ago has like made things so much better. In the same way that the minimal amount of developer coding knowledge that I have allows me to create a ton of code, right? A
Mhm.
ton of working code, right? I would never call myself a developer, but just a small amount of knowledge cranks it up. And so, yeah, it's been a really cool learning process. It'll continue to be a really cool learning process. It's forced me to like listen into writing podcasts and watch writing YouTube videos and just like, what are we doing here? Like, what's happening here? Like, how do we actually engage readers, right?
Yeah.
I've been going down this UX rabbit hole, like I said, for the last couple of weeks, which has been really fun. And just like grabbing as much of that little bit of knowledge that I need to like, okay, now I can potentially take advantage of it. And again, my goal is take this and now what does now the 2026 version of glossy pages looks like, because I've been able to iterate so fast on
Mhm.
this that like now I've created something really new and really cool. So yeah.
And you're doing it at the same time that the platforms are trying to figure it out too. Like you're
Yeah.
seeing Google trying to figure out what search looks like from this
Yep.
point forward. And
Yep.
like, are we going to even have SERPs in 2027?
That's right.
Like all of this stuff is kind of frontierish in that way. And so it's cool to kind of be riding the rapids, looking over and seeing like Google trying to figure it out too. And
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
I'm not alone. Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
you're definitely not alone.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so um, that's why I think
Cool.
these weekly calls are so great, because sharing this information, and that was one of the other things that the demo guy said, is like share everything. If
Yeah.
you're an organization that's trying to do AI stuff, you all have to be talking about what you're doing all the time. You can't
That's right.
try to keep this stuff secret, because there's no one right way to do something.
Yeah.
But somebody's going to find an interesting way to approach things that you can learn from. And you've definitely done that for me. Like the way you approach problems was so different from the way I approach problems that like I started learning a lot more once I started getting, once you started sharing what you were working on and I was sharing what I was working
Hmm.
on. And
Yeah.
so that
It's
would be the
been
other like
symbiotic
real,
for sure, man.
the thing to keep doing is if you learn something, info dump that on somebody else, because
Yeah. Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
who knows what will end up coming out of
7 months later, we're like, oh, fine tuning. That's what happens.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
cool.
exactly. All right.